Greetings to all in the love and light of the one infinite creator. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm one of the facilitators for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found on the L&L research page if you look to study groups and look down the menu to North American groups. I believe we would be listed there. We can also be found on Facebook. If you look for Seattle Law of One study group, we can be found there. We meet every Tuesday on Zoom from 3:30 to 5 p.m. and all are welcome to join us. You don't have to live in the Seattle area as long as you are available to join us on that Zoom time. We would love to see you. Just might want to check your time zones to make sure that you're at the right time and place when we meet. That would be 3:30 to 5 Pacific Standard Time. We encourage also folks to join the Facebook group if you would like to get updates on future Zoomcasts, including Jim McCarty, who will be joining us in a couple weeks on the 26th at the same time. We did have some problems with the old Facebook page, so I apologize to folks who tried to join our Facebook group. Within the last several weeks, we had problems with the page and we're not able to admit new members. So we did actually create a new page. So encourage and would love to have folks join us. Otherwise, today we are lucky to be joined again by Gary Bean and Austin Bridges. Both are on the L&L research team that works with Jim McCarty to channel the entity known as Quo roughly twice a month. Gary has also authored the Law of One Concept Guide and Tilting at Windmills, and I believe several other publications on the L&L website, available for free, all wonderful resources. Welcome, Gary and Austin. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thank you so much. It's always so great to be here and see everybody. It's an honor to be invited.
Yeah, likewise. Excited. Brain is feeling a little bit sluggish, but hopefully this will get the gears working and I will speak and something sensical will happen out of my mouth.
Grateful to be here. The feeling all too well. Well, it's great to see you both here. I was going to ask you how the weather is in Kentucky, but I think I'll just kind of skip over that part. I have been eager to ask you about your podcasts because I know you just uploaded one fairly recently. I just think this past week on the subject of polarity and polarization. And I have to be, in the interest of full disclosure, honest and say I'm more of a visual learner than an audio learner, so I generally don't actually listen to audio podcasts this much. So that's why I was looking forward to asking you about it and maybe some things that you can share with our viewers and participants. Can you share anything about any of your most recent podcasts? Let's talk about the most recent one on polarization. Can you share with us maybe some of the highlights or things that you've talked about that might be of interest to folks on the call, or folks watching?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Austin.
Yeah, the podcast, if you want to listen to it, it's at lresearch.org/podcast. And the most recent one we did on polarity is similar to many other episodes that we do, where Gary, Jim, and I get together and we just sort of go over a general topic in the lens of the Law of One. Sometimes it is sort of examining spiritual principles through the lens of the Law of One. Sometimes it's talking specifically about the Law of One. Sometimes we get questions from seekers that we go over on the podcast. So it's all, it varies every episode. Sometimes we have guests on and we focus on certain topics that the guests want to talk about. So in terms of like highlights of the polarity episode, we're not, the three of us aren't the most exciting individuals. We don't come up with great single one-liners that you can really highlight and say, wow, that was super insightful. Generally, the conversations are a little long and drawn out, but they're really enjoyable. And if you like to listen to, hour to 2 hour long conversations about the Law of One, it's worth it to tune in. There's so far 103 episodes of what we're calling the Law of One podcast on there, but there's also a big backlog of what was once a podcast / radio show with Carla on the same page that you can find, where there's 151 episodes of what eventually became Q&A with Carla and crew, where it was me, Gary, Jim, and Carla all together doing something similar.
Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Gary?
No, I think Austin covered the bases quite well. I often find the experience of doing the podcast, of going into it feeling like I'm not sure how I'm going to respond to this question or these questions, or I'm not sure what my full thoughts are. And as the process of inquiry begins and I start digging into the question, I find inspiration arrives and more insight is revealed. And I think that is not unique, of course, to me or this podcast, but to any seeker's process. Once one asks the question and then turns their focus to that question, and the universe tends to find ways to illuminate that question.
Indeed. Yeah, I remember Quo has said any number of times that oftentimes the questions are actually more important than the answers.
Yeah.
I had one follow-up question, and that's about the topic of, I think it was the previous podcast about spiritual purity. This is something that I've seen some references to, but don't know if I have a particular good understanding of the concept. Do you think maybe Gary, to start off, any thoughts, observations on what that means to you?
Yeah, that was a topic that I picked because it had just been really coming up for me. You know, reading The Law of One material, you read Ra describing the instrument's purity of dedication and how that was so critical to the contact itself. You know, without her purity, Ra would not have been able to send their narrowband transmission and be received. And it's a topic that comes up in the Confederation channeling as well, that the seeker who seeks the one and seeks to become transparent to the creator will, over time, go through a process of purification. So really, I propose that particular topic as an inquiry for my own illumination. And Austin and I chewed over it for quite a bit. And did I get insight from it? I did. What was it? Brain reboot, please, now.
Do you think spiritual purity, in Carla's case, if not in general, refers to the purity of one's polarization towards service to others or service to self, or maybe the degree to which one is a less distorted channel of the one original thought, the one infinite creator? Or I'm guessing it's not necessarily related to moral purity as we think of it in perhaps the conventional sense.
That's a really good point. Thank you for saying that. No, I don't think purity necessarily. Purity would, of course, translate to the moral realm, but I don't think purity is in the moral sense is what Ra intended. I think in my interpretation, you're on the right track with seeing it in terms of her polarity. Seeing it also in terms of the totality of her dedication. You know, when one thinks of what pure and impure might mean, impure isn't a pejorative or a judgment, but rather it's just a term to indicate that there's a mix of something else in the recipe. You know, one's service to others could be motivated by, you know, selfish reasons. It could be less than pure, whereas one could be motivated totally and purely in order to serve others, in order to love others. Austin, I'm gonna lean on you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Gary. I think, Jonathan, you're basically right in that purity, in the sense that we would talk about it, is very related to polarization and dedication and the will to serve others. Purity can be pointed in any particular direction, but as seekers of the law of one, we have this understanding of what it the path that we're on, whether it's serving others or serving self. And so when we interpret purity, it's sort of the dedication to that path, that single-minded dedication to that path. And then anything that kind of sways from that path would be the lack of purity. But I think your mentioning moral purity is important, because purity has also been one of those concepts that's been very abused by religions, and has been sort of used to control people through spiritual systems as well. So it's a tricky concept to work with. There's a lot of judgment wrapped up in it, especially when it's applied in a moral sense. So, that's one of the things that we talked about on the podcast, is sort of unraveling the difficulties that come with the concept and applying it to a law of one perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both. And again, I would encourage everyone who's watching this to go to the LNO research website. And I believe it's in the library link that you can find the podcast there. Check them out and listen to learn a little bit more in depth. And for those of us who did not join us for our first Zoomcast together a month ago or whenever that was, if I remember right, both of you met Carla she passed in 2015. And if I remember right, you both started channeling not long before that point, although you had known Carla since 2008 or so. Am I remembering correctly?
We have different timelines. I met Carla and Jim in 2002, and I channeled, or attempted rather, to channel with her beginning in 2008, when she led a new series of workshops called the Channeling Intensives, designed to teach a new generation to channel. However, it didn't feel right for me at the time. So after a few cycles, I bowed out, but supported and participated without doing the channeling. Then Carla passed in 2015, as you noted, and a new effort was begun to train channels either later that year or 2016. And that's really when I began my channeling effort, and have been attempting to learn and practice ever since.
So about 20 years ago, 2002.
Yeah, April 2002, 20 years ago.
Beautiful. And Austin, what's your timeline?
I first met Carla in 2012, first started officially working for LR Research in 2013. And my first attempts at channeling with LR Research were after she passed, with the channeling circle that Gary just talked about.
Nice. Well, I want to thank you both for everything that you have done over the years and continue to do in service to others, since, in case folks don't know, you are both on the board of LNL Research, and pretty much all day, every day, it seems, you are doing something in some capacity to bring these teachings to humanity. And it has certainly changed my life, and I'm guessing the life of everyone watching this for the better. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and take a look in the chat window, because I know we got a bunch of questions there. And I'm just going to go ahead and start with Linda, who has a question. Linda, would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering what type of opportunities you have need of in terms of volunteers.
Hi, Linda. It's great to hear from you. Great to see you again, too. Yeah, so we have, we maintain an email list of volunteers, and it contains people that have offered their service along any number of specific or general lines. People write in and say, I've been impacted by this material. I would like to help contribute. I would like to pay it forward. Or I have this specific skill set that I would like to lend. And we asked to add their email to a list And right now we have 180 people on a volunteer list of people who have offered their services. And our procedure is that when a need comes up, we ping that list and see who's available. And replies are never required. And for instance, we needed a new transcriber recently because Susanna retired the service. So we pinged the list and 24 people replied and said that they would like to help transcribe. Transcription's a key link in that chain that gets philosophy and inspiration from these higher density sources through humans into text form to be shared with the world. So we actually, instead of just adding one transcriber to the team, we added 6 because we had 24 offers and they were all great. So we're like, let's just build a 7-person team, 6 new ones plus the one first one. So to your question about what sort of volunteer we need, really anybody who wants to offer anything. And right now, in terms of the human power that LL Research is going to need for upcoming projects, we are just in the beginning of brainstorming a massive project to tag the entire transcript library. It is the transcript library is that which essentially begins in 1974 when Carla started channeling, and it includes all those consciously channeled transcripts from Atan, Latwii, Quo, Oxel, and some other randoms that have popped up here and there. And there are well over 1,600 of those sessions, and it constitutes a profound resource of information. The difficulty, though, is knowing what's in them. It's like walking into a big library and looking at a giant or multiple rather shelves of books, and they're not really labeled or organized or cataloged, and you just have to read each book to find out what's in them. So what we want to do is, when I say tag the transcript library, we're going to need dozens and dozens of people to read all of that material and to double up on reading and to triple up on reading and find ways to identify what is in those transcripts so that, one, we can build a massive index, A to Z. If one wants to know about wanderers, they can find out exactly what sessions are discussing wanderers. Or if one wants to know about 4th density wanderers, or if there is if Quo talks about wanderers dating in higher densities, they can go to this index as granular as you can think of. And no, that was a very silly thing that has never been discussed.
I was just picturing a spiritual Tinder of some sort.
And not only would we have this index, but also some kind of catalog of all the questions that were asked. And I'll wrap up my reply now. Jonathan at the start held up a book called A Concept Guide, and that came into being because I researched the law of one, the raw material, the raw contact, intensively by reading every instance of a particular term from adept through will. So for instance, if I wanted to know more about logos, I would run a search on the law of one for logos, then read every instance that logos came up. And I discovered that it was only by this larger meta-analysis and this cross-sectional read that logos really came into full view for me. Because as you know, in the law of one, the questions are meandering. Don is asking about logos an aspect or two in session 45, and then session 51, 6 later, there's another piece of it. So that same principle would apply all the more so to the 1974 to 2022 transcript library. There are so many riches and gems just waiting untapped in there that will only really become available through some kind of meta-analysis of the material. So volunteer needs, we have multiple that arise over time, and that's going to be our next biggie.
Gary, I noticed just in the chat window, there were at least 2 or 3 folks joining us on the Zoomcast who expressed interest in helping out as volunteers. Can you or Austin share with those folks how to apply, how to join as a volunteer?
Really simple, just shoot us an email. There's a contact address on the website if you go to About Us and then contact, and just send us an email, say you'd like to be added to the email list for volunteering, and we'll get you on the list. And every time something comes up, we ping the whole list.
Awesome. Thank you.
And part of, sorry.
Go ahead, Gary.
Prior to the call, you mentioned that LL Research is looking for a new hire. Part of their job will be to help us to find ways to make use of this reservoir of talent and gift and purity in heart to meet the needs of the mission and to serve the readership. Part of the difficulty is it's not the paucity of availability of help, it's us being hamstrung in our ability to tap it and to creatively organize it for mission related purposes.
So yes, I forgot to mention that earlier. So I think he just announced this position in the last week or 2, but looking for hiring as a paid position for working on L&L and largely in organizing volunteers. If somebody wanted to apply for that, can you share with folks how to apply for that position?
There's also just on the front page of our website, lresearch.org. If you scroll down to the news section, there's a posting that lists all the details of the position and how to apply.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lauren, I see you had a question that you wanted to ask. Would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Yeah, so it seems like we learned kind of how, when you came in contact with Carla and the group, but I was curious as to how you came into contact with the Law of One. What got you interested in it, or how did you hear about it? Thanks.
Austin, you want to roll first?
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, I'll go ahead first. I think we maybe did a similar question on the previous Q&A, so I'll do like a really short version, and I think there's maybe a longer version in the previous video if you're interested. My spiritual journey started, well, when I was very young. My mom was really into like New Age spirituality, and she actually had the Law of One books when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and she mentioned channeling and Ra at one point when I was a child, and that like stuck with me. But I didn't start any kind of spiritual seeking until much later. When I was an adult, I went through a phase of very heavy militant atheism, but then I went through a period of life where like the gears just started turning and started waking up and started watching crazy videos about UFOs and stuff. And then I saw somebody mention channeling and Ra, and like light bulb went off in my head, and I talked to my mom and went to see if she still had the books, and they were in the first place. Like they were all stored in a bunch of boxes. There were 20 books. I thought we'd be looking all night, but the first box we pulled down right on top were the Law of One books 1 through 4. And that's how I discovered it, and it's been my spiritual backbone ever since.
You didn't share that in the last Q&A, and I like hearing that. Could you share that part of the story where you are stargazing and you had heard from Edgar Mitchell after prompting yourself with a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so the phase in which I started seeking spiritually, I was not doing much in life. I was young 20s and delivering pizza for a living, so no responsibility. And most of my life was dedicated to stargazing. And I would take long drives out in the countryside and just be really awed by the beauty. And I would look out into the stars, and the way I describe it is I like would see the infinite expanse of space, and I feel it inside of me. And that's really like doing that every night started like that friction, that spiritual friction of like, I need to understand what I'm experiencing. I need to understand what's going on here. And so that started my like asking questions. And at the same time, as it happens synchronistically, I heard some guys at work talking about, weird stuff like UFOs, and they referenced a quote from I can't remember it's the comedian who's really spiritual, but it's essentially what if Bill, yeah. What if the universe is just one conscious being experiencing itself? And I'd never heard anything like that in my life. That was just ridiculous, and it felt significant. So I started talking to them, and then the thing, like, as I talked to him, he showed me a video of Edgar Mitchell talking about UFOs. And Edgar Mitchell, if you don't know, is a former NASA astronaut. He has walked on the moon. And at this point in my life, the only way you'd be able to convince me that UFOs were a significant phenomenon is if you showed me a NASA astronaut who's walked on the moon telling me it's a legitimate phenomenon. And so that blew my mind. That was like one of the biggest barriers of like, we should know about this. I should have known about this. I've been essentially like, there's been a blindfold put over me my entire life. And that kind of like lifted that blindfold and started that seeking.
A veil, if you will.
Yeah, it was a type of veil.
What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. And thanks for reminding us of that, Gary. So can you share with us, Gary, how you learned about the Law of One?
Yes. So the first 18 years of my life were really unconscious, unself-reflective, asleep at the wheel, if you will. And I had my parents weren't religious. We didn't go to church, nor were they philosophical or really have any ideology. It was, my world was just secular mainstream pop culture that, which I inherited from public schools and big families on either side. And yeah, my values were well contained within that sleeping reality. And then when I graduated high school, I signed up for the Army. And it's always something that surprises the heck out of people when they learn that, because it seems so antithetical to who I am, and it is indeed, but it's indicative of how little I knew myself. However, I think basic training did yield some benefit in commencing my path, teaching me discipline, so forth. But before I was going into the Army, I stumbled on a big book called Fingerprints of the Gods. It is by the author Graham Hancock. And I'd always been fascinated with history. I still am. I love history. And this was an alternative take on history. Graham Hancock scoured the world and put together a lot of puzzle pieces, many of which centered on the megalithic stone structures that are scattered around the world that still tend to defy modern engineering explanations and our understanding. Though Orthodox history does seem to find a way to write the story so that it works. But anyway, I am meandering. Hancock assembled all of this information to point to the existence of an original civilization on this planet that had achieved some high level of technological or spiritual sophistication and was wiped out through cataclysm, through war, whatever the case may be. Did you know there's like, it's been so many years, I forget the number now. There are dozens of variations on the Noah's Ark story. Some kind of cataclysm, often involving flood, where that wiped out people, and there were survivors. I don't know how many carry the Christian elements to animals of every kind on a big wooden boat, but the theme is still there. And so that the salient point about this story is that book blew the top off for me. For the first time, I was aware that the world that I knew, the totality that was my world, was limited, was a box, was a story, and there was far more mystery beyond its boundaries. So what that did was stimulate my seeking, my spiritual seeking. And if you read The Law of One and Confederation sources, they say that is one of their principal I think, principle, or at least one of their services to those on planet Earth to attempt to help stimulate the seeking. They obviously can't land on the ground and say, here are all your answers and here's how the universe works. And just,
I believe they tried that.
True. Yeah. Footnote.
How did you learn about the law of one? Where did you first see it?
So a year and a half later, adulthood and my spiritual journey had begun. I was asking questions, and then I just stumbled on book one online. I followed a series of links, and though I had little background or little context for understanding what I was reading, nonetheless, my eyes were waterfalls. I had, there was Ra, there was the law of one, and I, was just crying my eyes out, feeling like I had found my philosophical home, and it's been my framework and foundation ever since.
What a beautiful story. Thank you. Lauren, did you have any follow-up questions on that? Anything you wanted to follow up on?
Nope, I'm good. There's some good questions in the chat, so go for it.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you. Lynn, I see you have a good current events type question to ask. Would you like to unmute your mic and ask? About the pandemic, I believe.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that might be a catalyst to, I'm seeing a lot of stories of the suffering brought on by the pandemic, of bringing out kindness in people and people reaching out to one another. And I was just wondering if maybe that was my favorite rock quote is there a possibility for the planet harmonizing in one fine moment of inspiration? Yes, it's not probable, but it is possible. And I hope for that still.
That is one of my favorite passages too. Thank you for the shout out. Austin, Gary, either of you care to respond to that?
Austin does.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Everything is catalyst. Everything that we experience is an opportunity to, reflect on what it's giving to us, what it's teaching us. But obviously, some things are more significant than others, and something that the entire world experiences at one time, and where all of our attention points to a single catalyst, that's a very rare thing to happen. So I absolutely think it is a catalyst giving us opportunity, and some people seem to be taking that opportunity more than others. And I think that the lessons that it is attempting to teach us are infinite, whether it is looking at the suffering that has happened, or just looking at the social situation that it's brought on with the sort of breakdown in communication between people, and the pain on a social level, and not just suffering on the epidemiological level. There's a lot of things to examine and try to figure out, how is this pandemic asking us to open our hearts in different ways. So I definitely think that it is a catalyst for us globally. And Kuo has talked a little bit about it. People have asked questions about the pandemic and what it means, and they have assured us that it's part of the process of, the oncoming fourth density, that in order for us to heal things that are unconscious, they have to be brought to the surface. And catalyst is often the way that happens, is something kind of traumatic happens, like the pandemic, and that helps to bring up a lot of underlying issues that already existed but weren't being highlighted. And so the pandemic is helping, I think, to highlight a lot of the inadequacies or distortions that we have as a society, and asking us to heal those things. And I think that essentially it is all just about, like, how can we come together and find a way to agree about at least loving each other is the biggest lesson.
Well said. Anything you wanted to add to that, Gary?
Yeah, I think Austin hit the nail on the head as to what my interpretation of the primary function of this particular global catalyst is. It's an opportunity to come together, to love one another. And what it has, Austin and I did a podcast on the topic. Jim wasn't available at the start of the pandemic. And looking back at that podcast now, I see naivete in our vision, because we had hope. We had thought that this could be a more unifying catalyst for the globe. Like never before has planet Earth gone through something together with the communication technologies that we have and with the interconnectedness that we have. And it seems so simple. Like there is this virus, we ought to have a relatively common response to it. But what it seems to have done on one level, at least, is highlight the divisions that exist within society, highlight our difficulties of communicating and coming together. And Lynn, I'm inspired that your prism into this moment is of seeing kindness and seeing people wanting to help out, because there's a far different window to take on this offered by the media. And I would like to look through your window at this catalyst. But yeah, Austin said the rest really well.
If nothing else, it seems to have been a very catalyst for polarizing people, to force them to choose service to others or service to self in whatever way that might be. I was going to ask Lynn if she had any follow-up questions, but I think I saw her get up for a second. So perhaps if Lynn, if you can hear us, if you have any follow-ups, feel free to ask. Lynn, your mic is muted. If you want to ask a follow-up question, feel free to unmute.
I don't have a follow-up question. I can't wait till I can come down and see you guys again.
It's been a long time. Yeah, us too.
Hey.
Thank you, Lynn.
Wensu, you have a question about Quo and Ra, I believe. Would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Yes. So my question is, has Quo or any other entity has indicated further contact with Ra is possible, or it is even necessary? I know Ra instructed not to contact him without all three of them, but I wonder if our research group even try to attempt that again. Thank you.
So after session 106 in, I think it was March 1984, Ra has never been attempted to be contacted again. As you note, when it was the harmony and unity and the unique synergy of the archetypal qualities of love, power, and wisdom among Carla, Don, and Jim that enabled the Ra contact to happen. And 1984, as we all know, Don was in the midst of his mental decline, which led eventually to the conclusion of his incarnation. So the necessary ingredients were no longer in place to receive Ra. And the act of receiving Ra, unlike the conscious channeling that we still do today with Quo primarily, was an act of high magic that carried with it not only significant reward, of course, but significant risk. The journey of the Ra contact was one, as you will read, of their negative friends attempting to do whatever they could to pull out the stops of the Ra contact. And I don't mean just stop it, but trying actively to do harm to Carla, to her health, to her life, to either extinguish her light or enslave her light. And then the bizarre but incredibly harrowing scenario of her soul more or less being stolen away to negative time space. So for those reasons and others, it was never attempted again. We do get a flavor of Ra through Quo. Quo says that they consist of Hatan, Latwi, and Ra, with the middle of that group serving as a spokesperson. And do we want to talk with Ra again? I think anybody who falls in love with this material, us included, would love nothing more than to have Ra on the line again and be able to ask them nearly anything, like anything, yeah, right. Anything they speak on just is replete with profundity and inspiration and meaning. But the way that the group channeled Ra the first time was that Ra found them. You know, they didn't know they could channel sixth density, that the instrument could go into an unconscious state, or that there was an entity named Ra outside of, you know, Egyptian mythology. And Ra said during one point of the contact that, I'm paraphrasing, the requirements of receiving our contact are very strict, basically, and we will not, they used one of their archaic words that meant negotiate or haggle with the terms and conditions of our contact. And the possibility of something like this happening again are slim. So they didn't say it was impossible. So who knows? In the meantime, we do our level best to learn channeling and to channel as best as we can. And we are open to where the winds blow into our sails and lead us next.
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful question. Austin, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, a quick follow-up. You know, the way that Carla and Jim and Don first were able to channel Ra is by seeking to serve the highest and best that they could through channeling. And I don't think would ever attempt to recreate something specifically like the Ra contact for the sake of recreating it. I think what we hope to recreate is their will and their dedication to just serving the highest and best possible. And whatever potential that unlocks is what we're hoping to reach for.
Well said.
Sue, did you have any follow-up questions you wanted to ask about that? It's a wonderful question.
Thank you. So basically, I understand that Ra contact, at least when it happened, it seems it's only possible to channel Ra with during the trance state because it's a narrowband transmission. I just wonder now, you know, Earth has changed, the vibration has raised, if that has changed as well. I understand the trance channeling is, you know, harmful to the channeler. I think that's what we were talking about earlier about the purity, because Carla is so dedicated. She does not care the harm to her body. She's willing to channel. I think that's how it happened. I remember reading one question, I can't remember what session it is, that they asked what would happen if they continue channeling, and the Ra gave 3 answers. All 3 of them end with they have to end the contact. So it seems, you know, it's just going to take a toll on the channeler, no matter, even if there's no psychic greetings and all that. So yeah, so I guess I kind of just wonder, is it possible to have contact now without being in the trance? But you probably don't know that. Maybe if you can ask Paul sometimes. So that's more a comment, not really a question. Thank you.
Either of you have anything you wanted to say in response to that?
I have a thought, but I went first last time. Austin, do you want to go first?
And just very simple thought. Ross seemed to indicate that, you know, they were kind of unwilling to compromise in their desire to speak exactly as they wanted to speak, which is not something that is possible with the conscious channeling like we do. But, you know, infinite possibilities, who knows what is possible. Like I said, we're going to search for the highest and the best that we can do within what we have with us and our abilities, and whatever manifests is what we can offer.
Yeah, what made the Ra contact unique and allowed for its characteristic level of profundity and precision was the fact that the human filter was removed, trance channeling. Carla was, as Ra says, not in her body. So Ra was physically manipulating her vocal cords to relay exactly their words. And as Austin highlighted, in conscious channeling, that's not possible. So, however, even Carla, who's the Michael Jordan of channeling in my mind, the world's best, were it even possible to channel Ra in a conscious state, she would be necessarily coloring their words and translating their words and adding human bias. It's unavoidable in conscious channeling. So that would mitigate against what made the Ra contact the Ra contact. But final point, and also just amplifying what Austin already said, like when he mentioned infinite possibilities, we don't know everything there is to know about channeling. It's still, Don began the experiment in 1961, but it really didn't take off until Carla began in 1974. And Carla innovated practices that took the channeling a leap forward and defined the hallmark. And sorry, she innovated what became the hallmarks of LL Research's channeling. So great pioneering work was done, headway was made, and we know a lot thanks to Carla and thanks to Don and thanks to everybody's years of efforts. But there's still so much unknown. So that there's a mystery yet ahead and a big door open still for further discovery.
Indeed. Yeah, thank you both for the response. Thank you, Wensu, for the question. And I definitely want to highly recommend that folks who have not read any of the transcripts of the channeling sessions with Quo, check them out. I mean, they've been going on for decades now and still continue to this day. And I personally have found so many gems of love and wisdom and spiritual teachings in those channelings. And even though they're conscious channelings as opposed to trance channelings, boy, I might have gotten more out of those sessions than perhaps even the raw sessions. So I would encourage anyone to check those out. And again, to thank Gary and Austin for your part in being a channel for those teachings, which is a great segue into our next question. Shayla, I believe you have a question about the channeling experience. Would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Hello all, and thanks for being here. Well, you were talking before about, beginning of your channeling and learning about it. Can you maybe share how this process went? How did you go through it? Learning. Carla was natural at that, but you actually had to, learn that process. And how did it feel at the beginning? How did you learn to trust what's coming through, and so on? I'm done. It's your cue to go. Thank you.
This is what I believe we call awkward silence. Austin, you want to start off on this one?
Yeah, sure. The experience at first, it was very nervous. We had, thankfully, in learning how to channel, we learned from two very experienced channels. We had Carla's own teachings. If they're available on the website, if you want to learn about how Carla taught channeling, we have transcripts of Carla teaching channeling in workshops. And essentially our learning process involved going through those with our two teachers and going through all the steps of what it is required to, use Carla's kind of method of channeling, which involves a lot of preparation in, how to tune your consciousness and your mind to receive the contact, and then how to challenge the contact. And so for a lot of the initial process, I think for the first couple of times we met, we didn't even channel. We just practiced those methods and learned about Carla's methods there. And then when it was actually time to channel, learning to trust, I think we're in a little bit of a different space than like those early channelers who first started channeling with Don back in the 60s, because we have, decades of transcripts of channeling to, put faith in that this is a process. And so the trust for me was a lot of trust in the process itself, that, you know, I have my own experiences that tell me that this is a legitimate thing that can happen. And so I can rest in the idea that it can happen and that I have the ability to do this. But then I think most channels who learn to channel in this way will tell you that, like, there's a very subtle difference between feeling like you're just making everything up and feeling like you're receiving words from elsewhere, especially at first. You know, once you get some experience with it, you start to become familiar with the state that you're in when you're channeling, and be able to trust like the flow of words and know that like what's coming through you will actually form a coherent thought when you just let go. Most of the time, sometimes it still doesn't form a coherent thought. But trusting that was, you know, a lot of relying on faith in the process itself and knowing that it is a process that works, and then basing my, you know, refining the sensing of what's happening off of that trust.
Any thoughts to share on that, Gary?
Yeah. I'm really glad I get to be partnered with Austin on these opportunities, because he gives very adequate answers and is able to speak better than I can to various things, including this topic. And I resonate a lot with what Austin said, especially his emphasis on the trust factor. It is kind of antithetical to my personality, which is extremely self-conscious, cripplingly so. When I was younger, I used to be so socially wound up and tucked away inside. Self-conscious and controlling of my speech and outward appearance and behavior. And that is not what channeling is. The more self-conscious you are, the more you attempt to analyze the words coming through you, or exercise scrutiny while it's happening, the more you're going to get in the way and limit the flow or impede the flow. So you have to be able to either shut that self-consciousness off or set it aside for the time being and really just speak and lean into it and not know where you're going when you are vocalizing words, and trust that the next word is going to be there and the next and so forth. So that is not something we've been doing this for 5 or 6 years now, and that is not something I have yet mastered. I just, centimeter by centimeter, become incrementally more comfortable with the process. For when I began, Austin mentioned nervousness, and that was very much a part of my own process for reasons I've stated, but also, like, I want the assurance that if I'm speaking something, it's not coming from me. I want a buzzing in my head, or I want to get hot, or, I want some physiological or energetic sensation that that signals to me that, yes, you are receiving this beam. But I'm a
voice and bells and,
right.
Yeah, I know.
If there could just be a big shining light down on me.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I'm not given those signals. I'm a very hard case. It's called conditioning, and it's a phenomena that is completely subjective and unique to the particular instrument. And I don't get much in the way of conditioning. It just, I start out just kind of feeling like me, despite having really thoroughly undertaken the tuning and the channeling and setting my intention to be the best and clearest channel I can be. However, there is a phenomena that does start to emerge when I do get deep, and it very difficult to describe in spatial terms, but it feels as if I'm elongating and stretching, and like I simultaneously feel the dimensions of my physical body, but I also feel like, I don't know, like I'm taller, deeper in a way. It's really strange. But final thought, what encouraged me to really take that initial leap and channel was guidance given to me when I expressed a doubt of like, what if I screw up? What if I am saying something dumb? What if I don't have the contact? And the guidance was, so what? just speak. And the guidance reflected back from Jim and at the time Steve, and from Carla previously, was seldom is it that you're just 100% sure that it's not you, that there is something on the line. I remember Carla saying specifically that it was only in like looking back over multiple channelings that you can see that, okay, there is something here that's not just me. So there's a lot of faith in it. And we would, as a confederation does, we would always encourage everybody's discernment and knowing what's true for them when they read these transcripts.
Wow. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, one thing that strikes me is that how you have a nice balance of male and female energy on the team, since it's not just you and Austin and Jim, but also Trish and Kathy, I believe. Mm-hmm. So I'm only guessing there's something about that spiritual vibrational paint chip that somehow is a really nice match that Quo, I would imagine, is looking for. Shayla, that's such a wonderful question to ask. Did you have any follow-ups that you wanted to ask on that? I know Ken has a question that I wanted to make sure we get to, but want to make sure to give you a chance to ask some follow-ups if you have.
No, I just wanted to say thanks, and you two really are wonderfully paired, because Austin did the theory, but also you, in which was wonderful, but you, Gary, shared like 90% of feelings and mental state that I also have, and I guess we are all facing, with letting go and trusting, and so yeah, you gave me like optimism to continue or whatever. So thank you both for a great answer.
I forgot one piece. Shayla would really like it if I complimented her and thanked her for her Serbian translation.
You're welcome. Thank you. I do it with love. And by the way, Alex says hi as well.
Oh, hello to Alex. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shayla. Thank you for your gifts as well. Ken, I believe you have a question you've been waiting a while to ask, I believe. Would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Hear me all right?
Yep.
All right. Hey guys, great to meet you both, and thanks for your time and the work that you're doing. This is a really incredible opportunity. Got a question more so about, I guess, the content of the material. And actually, I'm in a couple of different online study groups, and recently in both of those, we've kind of discussed the concepts of healing as it's referenced, especially early on in book one. And I sense throughout the group and within myself, there's some confusion as to really the term itself, what it's applied to. Are they talking more so about mental, physical healing, or kind of, as Austin referred to in the pandemic response, getting more into the healing of the collective mind, if you will? I'm just trying to get a little bit of clarity and insight into what does the term really mean?
Gary, I think that you'd be good to take that one first.
I was hoping you might. Ken, that is a fantastic question. And I think healing ultimately is synonymous with evolution and transformation and the return journey to the creator. In one respect, we could see healing as undistorting that which has been distorted, or healing the illusion. I don't know actually if higher density beings would consider that they are on a path of healing, if healing would apply specifically to suffering and misunderstanding, or if healing would be a broader term that just means restoring the individual to the one, and so forth. But limiting the scope to third density, where it's already big enough as it is, one aspect of your question was healing as applied to the individual versus the collective. And I think those are ultimately it's safe to say that those dovetail, obviously. It might even be safe to say that they're one and the same, because the collective, of course, is only healed insofar as individuals heal themselves. The collective, it consists of a multitude of individuals, which it also highlights why the Confederation describes self-work as world work. Because the more that we heal ourselves, the more that we purify our hearts and allow love to come through and to clear our blockages, the more that automatically, necessarily reflects out to the whole. Our light lightens up the whole, and the more people who do the same work, the brighter the whole becomes. Healing, of course, is possible on a physical level and happens all the time, whether through allopathic healing, including our kind of mechanical methods of hiding symptoms through strong chemicals, or through more fundamental modes of healing and consciousness. However, I don't think that physical healing is necessary for healing to occur. Say, I'm trying to think of some physical condition that would be irreversible so far as we're aware. Say, like somebody is an amputee or in a wheelchair due to paralysis. Whatever original source in spirit or mind or consciousness that precipitated this outward scenario of being paralyzed in the wheelchair, if things could be healed at that level. Say I'm going to make a guess, the entity programmed an incarnation whereby they, prior to this incarnation, they were based their worth on what they could do outwardly in the world and how they looked and how they showed up in that way and their achievements. And they, for this upcoming incarnation, wanted to learn what worth in essay meant, E-S-S-E, what worth in essence meant, to find out who they are minus what they're doing in the world. So they programmed for a situation whereby, like I am hypothesizing, they are in a condition of being in a wheelchair. So during the incarnation, they could successfully learn their lesson and have experienced the healing necessary on a completely interior level. Whatever it was that was blocking their worth, say, they could heal on that level, but that wouldn't necessarily be reflected outwardly in their physical condition.
Carla would be a good example of that, wouldn't she? Of someone who seems to have chosen physical impairments as pre-incarnative choices in order to focus more on that inner work, and therefore trying to heal those physical symptoms probably would not have been, well, tried, I think, and didn't go so well.
That's a really good point.
With what you're describing.
Yeah. Morris, who's on the call with us, knows that journey quite well, and was among those who really wanted to contribute to Carla's healing. She had a variety of physical difficulties, and she tried various methods, and various help was offered over the years, and nothing yielded to healing on an outward level, at least. But she did feel quite successful in learning the lessons that the physical condition helped to precipitate.
Indeed.
And I've been going for a while.
Austin, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, to build off of what Gary was talking about, Ra addresses healing as a very holistic thing of mind, body, and spirit. And they describe the process by which disease can manifest as being unprocessed catalyst, essentially. If there's something within our spirit or our mind that we are not addressing adequately, it has the potential to manifest in the body, and that's what our traditional healing methods deal with, or conventional healing methods deal with, is primarily the body, and the inner catalyst goes unaddressed. And so one potential way to heal the body is to look at what is manifesting that condition and addressing that. And so that's sort of what Gary was talking about. But a few things that Ra talks about that I think are really important in terms of healing is, one, that's not a complete dismissal of what Ra called allopathic healers, which would be, you know, conventional doctors. They make a point to say that allopathic healers are healers. They, you know, are entities who have dedicated their lives to healing people, and what they do is you know, valid in a lot of ways. There might be some missing pieces to the medicine profession, but you know, they are healers. And then they also talk about the relationship between healer and patient, and how healing is basically only ever done by the self, and that the healer is a catalyst that will allow the self to realize the potential for healing. And so the important aspect being that healing is done through the self realizing their own catalyst and ultimately realizing the unity of the mind, body, spirit, unity of themselves as creator, and the clearing of whatever blockages they have in the perceptions of themselves is the essential piece of that healing. And that the relationship between the healer and the patient is not one of receiving healing from somebody else, but somebody offering catalyst to allow the self to realize that unity. And I think, you know, there are probably some conventional doctors that do that just through the care that they offer, and then that works in conjunction with whatever mechanisms of the body they were altering to provide essential healing. Or if it doesn't work, then maybe another ailment will manifest later along the same lines that wasn't healed essentially. So the body was healed, but the mind wasn't. And so there might be continuing issues later. And then you mentioned the personal and collective, and Gary touched on this. I just want to reiterate it. And, you know, I think that healing the self is healing the collective. There's the distinction between the inner self and the outer self is part of the illusion of third density, essentially. And whatever we do to heal ourselves essentially influences the world, the universe as a whole. You know, it's part of the message of the law of one. We are the creator. When we heal ourselves, the creator is realizing itself in the most essential sense. So I think that's an important aspect of trying to figure out where healing is to be done. You know, we can address collective issues, but also we can't ignore the healing that is calling for us to do on ourselves.
Thank you both so much for sharing those really profound teaching learnings that I think we can all learn and grow from, for sure. I was going to ask Ken if he had follow-up questions, but it looks like we got disconnected, and it looks like he might have just rejoined us. Ken, if you are on the call, would you like to ask any follow-up questions to Austin or Gary? Ken, if you are here, and it looks like you are, yes. Did you unmute your mic? Yes. Would you like to ask follow-up questions?
No follow-ups. Unfortunately, I had some video and audio problems as you were answering my question, but just wanted to say thanks to both you guys for the thorough and detailed answers. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking the question. And that does remind me, as we are drawing to the close of our session, that if you would like to watch the video of the session, we will be uploading it to YouTube sometime later today, tomorrow, and it will be available on the LNL Research website, along with all the recordings of our previous Zoomcasts with Gary and with Austin and Jim McCarthy. They can be found on the LNL Research website. If you go to library and interviews, I think they can be found there. We are kind of at the end of our time, and I did want to ask Gary and Austin if he had any thoughts, reflections you wanted to share with us before we part ways for now.
Just a lot of gratitude, and thank you so much for inviting us here. Thank you for the great questions, and it's an honor to be here. I really enjoy these talks, and you know, if you want to learn anything else, it's, you know, lresearch.org. We have tons and tons of material and information all available for free.
Yeah, this is still a novel experience for us, just the second time. So gratitude to Jonathan Tong for facilitating this and being dedicated and holding this space on a regular basis, and for inviting us. And thanks to all of you for giving us the space to share. We're constantly inspired by the law of one study of others. I mean, the law of one is not anything I think really anybody on planet Earth, Carla Ruckert and Don Elkins included, can master. It's a philosophy far beyond any one person, and it's really a collective study that's going to take millions of years. So we do have some expertise that is unique to us, of course, with research, but we learn from everybody as well. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to share our own passion.
Thank you both so much for the gift of your presence and your time and your teach learnings, and for all you and all of our friends, our brothers and sisters at L&L Research have done in service to others and continue to do. Blessings to you, blessings to everyone who are here on the Zoomcast, blessings to all who are watching this at some other place and time. Look forward to seeing you all next time. Until then, Adonai, namaste.